You call it a crisis like no other. What's driving it? Purely the fact that we all need memory for data centers?
Absolutely. I mean, and it is like no other because we've been through the pandemic, we've been through a really volatile year just now, like with the tariffs, and we still didn't see a drop like this, right? So this is completely different situation, and essentially there is just not enough memory for the players that need it, and given that how many different products we need memory in, right? So that's what's essentially creating the crunch. But more importantly, it's not just about the drop now and then the market will recover. It's about what makes it really different and much more dire for the industry. It's how this is going to create a permanent change, a structural reset of the entire industry, both in terms of TAM. So just this year, we're looking at about 160 million units wiped off the market. But even when it starts to recover, which as of our assumptions, the situation would stabilize somewhat mid-27 and we're starting to go in positive growth territory. But you're still looking at, close to 160 million off the TAM. So throughout our forecast, we're not expecting the TAM to get back to prior, 2025 levels.
Right.
But within that, again...
Can I jump in on that TAM? Why will it be so long-term diminished?
So essentially, the reason for the drop is how the change in the competitive landscape is gonna the impact that's gonna take. So where is that 160 million coming from? It's the prices of the memory, right? And why we keep saying, the prices of the memory that has shot up to even 300% from what they were last year, and they're continuing to go higher. Memory that used to contribute to about 20% of a smartphone BOM cost is now anywhere, tripling that. So imagine a smartphone that is at below $100. If the memory cost used to be $15, $20, and that's tripled, it's essentially making below $100, $150 smartphones uneconomical to make anymore. So those OEMs, and there are a lot of, Android OEMs operating in that space with majority of their portfolio, some with 90% of the portfolio below that. Those are the ones that are at extreme risk. Not to say that anyone is immune. Even the larger players like Apple and Samsung are going to face higher memory prices, but at least they are able to secure the supply. And when they get the supply, or at least majority of it, they can afford those higher prices, right? Because their devices have larger margins. It's really those lower end Android players that are already operating on, razor thin margins that simply not going to be able to make those phones, those below $150 phones.
So it feels, Nabila, like it's the emerging markets that are going to be hit the most in terms of end demand, in terms of lower cost phones. Can we not innovate our way out of this?
I would, and I think I said that earlier to someone, that we are, this is going to be a time of survival of the fittest, where of course, the larger players are going to be able to secure their supply and leverage their margins to be able to absorb some of the costs. But we always see, right, at times of crisis is when the biggest innovations come out, right? So, we're curious to see, and we're already hearing of some of the lower OEMs either resorting to used devices to get the RAM from that, and memory from older phones. But we still don't think it'll be enough to avert the drop that we're seeing. The other strategy, a mitigation strategy that they're thinking about or going to leverage, is that they're going to try to move up in price segments, right? So target above $200 phones. But again, the challenge there is that demand there is going to be very sensitive because, one, there's going to be so much increased competition from more established players in those price segments that it's going to be really hard for the low end, below $100 brands to be able to get demand or consumers to buy their devices above $200. So even though they're being ambitious, I think it's going to be a big challenge to operate at the same volume at higher price segments. So, that brings me to my other point. We're not only looking at a full competitive landscape change where many players exit and, share change between the larger players that are remaining, but also a complete product mix shift of the industry that is going to last for a long time. Because even when the crisis stabilizes and memory prices go down slightly, they're not going to go back to prior levels. So it's almost never, permanently uneconomical to make those sub $100, $150 devices.
So are we going to be keeping our phones? Are we going to be keeping our phones for longer, Nabila? That was already a trend.
Yes, exactly. So the consumers that are not going to be able to afford those higher price segments or higher prices, which are across the board, not just on low end, some are going to end up resorting to, keeping their devices longer or resorting to the used market. So there's just so many dynamics at play, and we're eager to see how OEMs and consumers adapt. But it's going to be a very challenging couple of years.